So let us talk about one of the most useful technique when it comes to separation of critical band pairs. And I'm talking about the gradient elution technique. Gradient elution techniques give the benefit of resolving the critical band pairs with the help of change in the strength of the mobile phase. So let us understand with the help of this video what is the difference between isocratic elution and the gradient elution? What are the principles of the gradient elution? What are the benefits you will get out of using the gradient elution? During what circumstances you probably will not be able to use the gradient elution? And finally, what are the alternatives to the gradient elution? So let us begin with the presentation now. Right, so these are the 5 points that we are going to discuss today. And the first one is let us understand, yeah, let us understand what is the difference between isocratic elution and the gradient elution. So the isocratic elution is something during which the mobile phase strength or the composition of the mobile phase will not change throughout the chromatographic run. For example, if you are having a binary system and if you keep 30% of the aqueous buffer into port A and 70 percentage of the methanol into port B, and if you give this proportion that 30 as to 70, and if you do not change this proportion of the mobile phase throughout the entire chromatographic run, then you are actually running a isocratic elution mode, right? You are using the isocratic elution mode for your chromatographic separation. Now, rather than keeping aqueous and organic solvents into a separate container, separate port, you can always mix them together with the required proportion, required ratio, and then keep into any of the port, either port A or port B. So, in essence, in isocratic elution mode, your mobile phase composition will never change. It will remain same and constant. So, what is the gradient elution then? So the gradient elution is that you can able to change the proportion of either A port or the B port, or you can able to change the strength of the mobile phase. And what determines the strength of the mobile phase in case of reverse phase chromatography? In case of reverse phase chromatography, the content of organic solvent determines the strength of the mobile phase. So you will be able to change the content of organic solvent, and hence eventually will have the weaker or stronger mobile phase during the entire chromatographic run. So let us take an example of gradient run as per as the RPLC is concerned. So the percent A and percent B. Percent A contains 90 percentage of the solvent, and in port B there is a 10 percentage of the, let us say, organic solvent. Generally, if you speak in terms of RPLC, the port A always people prefer to have the aqueous solvent or the weaker solvent, and the port B will have the stronger solvent or the organic solvent like ACN or methanol or THF. So during this program, what you can see that from 0 minute to 5 minute, you will have the constant proposition of either port A and port B. So you can say it is the isocratic still 5 minutes of the time. But what is happening after 5 minutes till 30 minutes? You can see that the proportion of port A is getting changed from 90% to 20%. And similarly, in case of port B, the content of port B is getting changed from 10% to 80%. So there is a change of almost, in case of port A, around 70% change from 5 minutes to 30 minutes. And this is called as what? The gradient elution mode. Because now if you look at the port B part, your 10% is only consist of organic solvent, but at the end of 30 minutes, you will have the organic content of 80% in the mobile phase. So what that indicates, you are actually making your mobile phase stronger and stronger and stronger till it reaches to the 30 minutes. Okay, and if you would like to see the chromatographic representation, and here it is onto your screen. So isocratic, if you see the dotted lines at the bottom of this chromatogram, right? It is not changing. But in case of gradient, can you see that it is constant for some time for 5 minutes and then it is changing linearly. It is changing linearly till it achieves its maximum figure. The case we have given, let us say 80 percentage of the mobile phase B, and then it is again coming back to its normal proportions, like let us say 90 and the 10. So this is called as the gradient dilution, and this is this difference between isocratic and the gradient dilution mode. So, so what are various shapes of the gradient dilution? And let us understand, what shapes are possible. I mean, what kind of gradient evolution patterns you can fix and utilize during your method development or the analysis. So there are three patterns you can use. One is linear, then the curved one, and the segmented one. So by looking at the diagram, you can see that in case of linear gradient elution mode, your proportionate of B is increasing in the same rate throughout the entire chromatographic run. Let us say from 0 minute to 20 minutes, you can see that the percentage of B is increasing with the same rate. So whatever change in the proportion of B is happening, every minute it will be same and the constant. But in case of curved one, you can see that the initial increment into the proportionate B is little low, but as the gradient is approaching towards the end, then it is increasing a little bit with the high rate, like exponentially. What is meant by segmented? In case of segmented, the rate of increase of the B are at two different figures. So at the beginning, you can set the slower rate of increase up to some point, let us say up to 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, you can give the higher rate of increment in the proportion B. But if you ask me, the most widely and preferred used technique is what? The linear gradient elution mode, and which is also a more reproducible and reliable technique. So let us understand what are the applications of the gradient elution technique now. The first one is to narrow down sample retention range. So in case if your sample contained multiple components, some are polar and some are non-polar. So what is going to happen in case of reverse phase chromatography? In case of reverse phase chromatography, the polar compounds will elute early and non-polar compounds will elute late. And because of this diversity in the sample polarity, you will have the components eluting for the higher range of the time. So let us look at the chromatogram and then understand how this gradient mode can help us in mitigating this challenge. So yes, here we go. And yes, I have done almost. Fantastic. So let us look at the chromatogram A. On the top chromatogram, where the percent B is 50. And how much is the resolution possible? Look at here. Resolution is 1.5 between the critical band pairs. Now, when you increase the proportionate of B, again, this A and B, these are the isocratic elution mode chromatograms. They are not the gradient elution mode chromatograms. I mean, in the first chromatogram, which is denoted by A, you will have percent A is equal to 50 and percent B is equal to 50, and then you run the chromatogram for 80 minutes. And then these are the elution patterns you got. In the similar way, if you increase the proportionate of B to 65%, then how much will be the proportionate of percent A in the same run? It will be 35%. So with this mode, look at here, the resolution between critical band pair has further reduced to zero point 0.8, further reduced, decreased to zero point 0.8, which is not really acceptable. So now, if you want to reduce the runtime, because if you have to have the acceptable resolution, you need to run the chromatogram for 80 minutes. But now, let us understand, if you put the gradient in the place where you will increase the percentage of the B from 20 to 100%, right? You will keep the percent A and percent B into the separate port now. And now you are making the change into the strength of the mobile phase. At the beginning, you have 20 percentage of the B, means how much percentage of the A mobile phase will be present? It will be 80%. So 80% A, which is probably the aqueous part, and the 20% B, which is, let us say, methanol or the organic solvent, which is a weaker mobile phase. And because of that, you can see that there is a good resolution between the peak number 1, 2, 3, and 4. But if you look at the first chromatogram, are you able to see the resolution between peak number 1 and 4? They are eluting as a plug. You will not be able to see any resolution happening between peak number 1 and 4, 1 to 4. Because the 50% A and 50% B is decomposition with the first chromatograph, which is quite stronger mobile phase for this kind of separation. But now with the gradient elution mode, what we've done that you have made the weaker mobile phase at the beginning, 80% of the aqueous and only 20% of the organic. And then you given the gradient of from 20% organic to 100% B, right, within a 11 minutes or 10 minutes. And because of that now, see, because of this weaker initial mobile phase, this critical band pairs from 1 to 4 got well resolved. And as you are progressing your chromatographic run, your mobile phase is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And because of that, this late eluting peak will start coming early, and you can see that within 11 minutes of the runtime you got all the peaks eluted from peak number 1 to peak number 9. It is because of what? Having the mobile phase with your requirement. The initial mobile phase is weaker, and then you start building the strength of the mobile phase by increasing the proportionate of the organic solvent. And as the mobile phase is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, you will be able to elute the highly retained compounds like compound 8, compound 9, otherwise which would have eluted at 40 minutes and 70 minutes with 50% A and 50% B. I am talking about the first chromatogram. So do you understand now how the gradient elution mode can help you to narrow down the retention range and hence can increase the throughput of your laboratories? The second important benefit you will get is what? To separate high molecular weight compounds like peptides, proteins, and synthetic polymers. Researchers found that the gradient elution technique helps in separating, managing, and resolving the high molecular compound like peptides, proteins, which are having, let us say, the molecular weight even more than 1000 daltons or sometimes in kilodaltons. But you will be able to manage the resolution and separation by using a simple gradient elution technique. The late eluting interferences. See, sometimes if you are working with the, let us say, drug products like tablets, capsules, ointment, or injectables, do we find that the interested compounds are getting eluted within the short run time? But there are some eluters, some solutes which are not part of your analyte or impurities, but they belong to the placebo of your sample, and they get eluted very late into the chromatographic run. Though it is not of interest to you, but they can get carried forward into the next injection, right? During the next injection, and you don't want to make it happen. So it is very important to make such long eluting compounds eluted into the same chromatograph, and this gradient elution will help you now. So as we discussed that the strength of the mobile phase can be manipulated and increased, and as you are going to increase the strength of your mobile phase by increasing the proportion of organic solvent, these late eluting compounds will start eluting early into the chromatographic run. So for example, it is eluting at, let us say, 80 minutes with the isocratic mode. But the moment you start building the strength of the mobile force, whatever was eluting at 80 minutes will start eluting at, let us say, 10 minutes. And you will be able to finish the chromatographic run quickly. So these late eluting interferences can be well managed and handled by using suitable gradient elution run. The next one is to maximize detection sensitivity. Now, this is something really very important as per as analysis of related substances are concerned. And as we're talking about the much complex analytes like nitrosamines and genotoxic impurities, I think this point is very important for all of us. So let us look at the chromatogram and then understand how it practically happens. Okay, so let us look at the first chromatogram, which is isocratic, with the percentage of B is how much? 30. That means the proportionate of A is 70% in the first chromatogram. Can you able to see the peak looting at around 50 minutes? Probably not, because it is not properly visible. It is only indicated by the asterisk mark, and hence your attention can go there. So there is a peak present at around 50 minutes in the isocratic run, which is a late eluting compound. But if you give the gradient run of 5 to 100 percentage B, means you are changing the proportionate of B and making the mobile phase stronger. Proportionate of B is always organic solvent, which increase the strength of your mobile phase. So the more is the composition, the content of percent B or organic solvent, the higher will be the strength of your mobile phase. And because of that now, can you see here? The peak started eluting early, and the peak which was eluting at 50 minutes has got eluted at around 16 plus minutes. Now will you be able to see the response coming out of that peak? You can see, right? Though it is marked with asterisk mark just to identify the same peak which was eluting at 50 minutes now got eluted at 16 minutes with the better significant response. So the gradient elution also helps you in increasing the responses for the stress amount of the compounds. And this is the way you will get benefited just because of using the gradient elution mode. The fifth one is to enhance response for diluted sample solutions. So in case if you are handling the diluted samples where the amount of solute is not enough to achieve the adequate response, the gradient elution technique is certainly going to help you. Because the moment you start the gradient elution run, right, the time comes where the mobile phase becomes stronger. You will have the higher amount of organic content into the mobile phase, and the same thing is going to happen inside the column also. And once the such higher amount of the stronger mobile phase reaches to the sample plug, right, the the band which was available earlier inside the column will get reduced, and because of that reduced band of the sample you will have the sharper peaks, and hence the response of the analyte will still get further enhanced just because of the gradient elution technique. The sixth one is during method development. Now this is something really very important. Even though the intention is not to develop the gradient elution mode, but it will help you to understand, what are the constituents of the sample, how many analytes are present into a sample, and probably just by running the gradient elution mode you will be able to understand if I have to have the isocratic run, what should be the preferred percentage of the port A and the port B. So it is really certainly going to help you out in very strong way during method development. I strongly recommend you to use the gradient elution technique during all kind of method development. Okay, So the third point is, we talked about the good part of the gradient. Now let us understand, in what situation the gradient run may not be suitable. And here are some points that you must think before choosing gradient elution as your preferred elution mode. The strongly retained additives such as amines. So if your mobile phase contain the strongly retained additives such as amines, probably you will not be able to use gradient that effectively. You may not able to get the reproducible result. Second thing is hydrophobic ion pairing reagent. So in case of using the ion pairing reagent, it is also not much preferred technique because you will not have the reproducible result sometime. And the third one is with the RI detector, you will not be able to use the gradient elution mode. Now, what precautions one has to take during the gradient run? And here are a few points for you. So, you must use the gradient purity or high purity or ultra purity solvents and the reagents during all gradient elution, right? Because you know that the gradient elution mode will not yield the plane and the flat baseline. The baseline may get the height. I mean, you know that, what happens in the gradient elution run. The baseline doesn't remain the same throughout the entire run. And because of that, it is very important to use the highly pure solvent and the reagents for preparation of the mobile phase or the solution and the standard solutions. Dual volume. See, the dual volume is also called as the gradient delay volume. So this dual volume consists of the HPLC volume from the gradient mixer till the head of the analytical column or inlet of the analytical column. So whatever comes in between the pump, the gradient mixer volume itself, then the injector port, then all the tubings till the column head consist of the dual volume. And if your HPLC systems are having different dual volume, your retention time may get vary because this will make this dual volume delays the entry of the gradient into the chromatographic into the HPLC column. So the greater is the dual volume, more will be the delay of this gradient into the HPLC column, and because of that you may expect delay in the retention time, or sometimes it may be hampering your selectivity also, but for certainly you can experience the delay into the retention time. So it is always better to understand, if you are going to use multiple HPLC systems for the gradient analysis, have all this dual volumes similar for all the HPLC systems so that you will not have retention time variation from one system to another system. So look at the dual volume very critically. The solvent miscibility at the high percentage of the B. Now, what is high percentage of B denotes? It is nothing but the organic content. So as you are making the mobile phase stronger, that indicates that you are going to pump more proportion of the organic solvent as you are progressing towards the gradient elution mode. But what happens in case if you have a solute or buffer into the port A, because the solute and the buffers may not have the required solubility and miscibility with the higher amount of organic solvent. See, at the beginning of the gradient, you may have the more portion of the aqueous, and in that situation, the salt will remain solubilized. But as you are progressing towards the higher proportion of the B, now the higher organic content is coming inside the mobile phase. The aqueous portion is getting reduced, and you never know what is happening at that proportionate of the organic content. Does your solute remains solubilized, or does they precipitate out of the mobile phase? So it is very important that understand the miscibility of the aqueous part, the precipitation of the salt buffer at the higher proportionate of the organic solvent, so that you will not end up with the tubing blockage or the pump issues while running the chromatography. The fourth important point is change in column back pressure due to change in viscosity. So you are making the changes to the mobile phases, right? and because of that your viscosity may get changed. And very specifically for methanol content, which is highly viscous as compared to ACN, you can experience increase in back pressure if your organic solvent is methanol. So understand, whether at the highest possible gradient proportion of solvent B, your back pressure remains within the acceptable range of your HPLC operation. So does it still remains lower than what is not going to disturb the life of your HPLC column? So understand the back pressure of the entire gradient run, and you can even monitor that. The fifth one is allow equilibration time at the end of the gradient. So it is very important, as you are increasing the strength of the organic solvent, right? You are increasing the strength of the organic solvent. But when you end the when you end the gradient run, and if you immediately inject the next solvent solution, your system will not have properly equilibrated because you did not give enough time for the equilibration. So it is very important that you must give, let us say, 5 minutes or 7 minutes of the time for the system equilibration to its initial gradient proportion. So for example, if your initial proportion is, let us say, 80-20, and you are reaching to 20-80 at 60 minutes, so make sure that you give, let us say, 5 minutes of the equilibration time in the same gradient run, so that your mobile phase composition will become 80-20 after 60 minutes, maybe 60.1 or 61 minute, and then further maintain the same proportion to, let us say, 66 minute, so that the system will get properly equilibrated and will be ready for the next injection. So allowing equilibration time between two injection is so important for the gradient elution mode. Okay, so let us understand, in case if you do not want to use the gradient elution mode, you can think of using the polar stationary phases. See what happens into the reverse phase chromatography. Your retention of non-polar compounds will be much higher. And the one challenge is what? If you really want to reduce the retention time, what you can smartly do? You replace the stationary phase from non-polar nature to a polar nature, like cyano or amino. Now, these stationary phases do not interact much with the non-polar compounds, which were eluting very late into these stationary phases like C8 or C18. The moment you get the cyano or amino stationary phases, now those non-polar compounds will never get retained for that long onto the stationary phases, and you will have the shorter retention time just by replacing the stationary phase from non-polar to a polar. And another option could be uses of the strong organic solvent like tetrahydrofuran or THF. But also understand whether you are not going to miss the resolution of the early eluting peaks while using the THF. So these are the 5 important points I thought of discussing with you, and I hope that these 5 points must have given you the information about how one can select the gradient dilution technique, what precautions must be taken, and what are the shortcomings of the gradient elution techniques. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will meet you soon with such kind of useful and informative videos. Till then, take care and bye bye. See you soon.